The image shows a goddess holding the earth. She is setting a trial for humanity because they have continued to destroy nature. For humanity's continued destruction of nature, a goddess set forth a trial. Suddenly, dungeons appeared all over the world. A clear ultimatum was given. Achieve certain results within them, or humanity will be annihilated. The fate of the world now rests on the shoulders of those who must face this challenge. Even with the world under threat, routine finds me at the academy. A voice pulls me from my thoughts. Beaming, Kai showed Hinata his new explorer mark and asked for his opinion. Hinata's reply that it was incredible concealed a heavy burden that his friend did not notice. Noticing none of his friend's hesitation, Kai cheerfully slung an arm around his shoulders. He energetically insisted that Hinata needed to work hard too. However, Kai's friendly tone shifted to one of mockery. With a smug smirk, he stated that for someone of level 0 like Hinata, success would be impossible. The taunt struck Hinata, leaving him in a stunned silence. With the appearance of dungeons, the world became a place where the strong, defined by their levels, devour the weak. After Kai's mockery, Hinata is left behind, coming to terms with his reality. He is the weakest of all. The idea of someone like him becoming an explorer seemed, in that moment, utterly impossible. Kai's mockery continued inside the classroom, in front of other students. He laughed loudly at the idea of Hinata becoming an explorer, declaring there was no way it could happen. Pressured by the group, Hinata just muttered, seemingly agreeing with the humiliation. The public humiliation continued as Kai explained the reasons for his mockery to the class. He exposed that Hinata was not only level 0 but also possessed the lowest possible potential, rank F. In light of this, he rhetorically questioned how the weakest in the world could even think of going to a dungeon. Unexpectedly, Hinata's submissive attitude shifted to one of quiet defiance. He acknowledged that his level had not yet risen, but calmly suggested that things could change from now on. This simple expression of hope caught Kai off guard, his mockery instantly turning to shocked anger. As his classmate glared at him in anger, Hinata reflected in silence. Kai's mockery was nothing new. For a long time, people around him had ridiculed and despised him simply for being level 0. He remembered the reason why he was there. It was to escape that environment of constant contempt that he had left his hometown and enrolled at Seishin High School, seeking a fresh start. However, his hope for a fresh start was quickly destroyed. To his misfortune, Kai also attended the new school. Word soon spread that Hinata was level 0, and Kai took the lead in the mockery, publicly dubbing him the eternal level 0. Suddenly, Hinata's attention was drawn to the sky. An airship began to broadcast the public announcement of the day's Explorer ranking, an event that captured everyone's interest. The daily ranking celebrated the top 100 explorers as heroes, but this only highlighted Hinata's grim reality. Dungeons were dangerous, and no one would ever accept him into a group. However, as he looked at the ranking, something unexpected appeared on the screen, leaving Kai and the others in a state of shock. A long-haired figure swiftly passed by, shocking the other students, including a short-haired girl. The newcomer was Hinata, the strongest student. The daughter of a famous clan leader and with S-rank potential, she was admired by all, the complete opposite of the male Hinata. The scene brought back a memory of the first day of class. During student introductions, he saw Kamui Hinata for the first time and was left in a state of shock, awed by her presence. The memory continued. After the renowned Kamui Hinata finished her introduction, it was the turn of the student seated directly behind her, the male Hinata. He instantly felt the piercing stares of the entire class fall upon him, silently judging him for the coincidence. The teacher then called for the next student. As his classmates whispered about Kamui's demeanor, the male Hinata panicked, realizing his turn to introduce himself had arrived so suddenly and unavoidably. The memory concluded with his disastrous introduction. He shot up from his seat so abruptly that he knocked over his chair, then stammered out his full name in a panic, Suzuki Hinata. He awkwardly pointed out the name coincidence with the S-rank girl and finished with a plea for them to get along, cementing his status as the other Hinata. The scene shifted to the academy's large dormitories. As Hinata marveled at the size of the building, a voice called out, asking to confirm if he was Suzuki Hinata. Caught off guard, he turned and affirmed that he was. The woman introduced herself as Kiyono, the dorm supervisor. She gave Hinata a friendly welcome, handed him the rulebook, and told him she was counting on him going forward. Surprised by the warm reception, Hinata politely accepted. Once in his room, Hinata's plan was to first unpack his things. However, he then suddenly remembered there was a welcome meeting for all the dorm residents happening in the cafeteria that day. At the welcome meeting, Hinata watched as other students excitedly formed a party, bonding over their similar ranks. Amidst the excitement, however, one of the girls in the new group finally noticed Hinata's presence, questioning who he was and why he was there. Put on the spot, Hinata introduced himself to the table, stating his name and his classification. Rank F. His honest answer was met with stunned disbelief from the others, who were shocked that someone with such a low rank was among them. After their shock, the students explained it was unusual for a non-explorer to live in the dorms, as the school was geared towards them, which affirmed Hinata's own insecurity. The conversation then shifted to his gloves, with one student asking if he wore them to hide his real level. To avoid further questions, Hinata hesitantly agreed. An explanation of the world's rank system is presented. The rank, which ranges from a minimum of F to a maximum of S, indicates a person's potential capacity as examined at birth, dictating how strong they can possibly become. Surprisingly, Hinata's tablemates began to explain the nuances of the system. They argued that even being F rank didn't mean he couldn't excel, as potential doesn't always translate to actual strength, and even A-rank explorers could fail to progress, leaving Hinata confused by this new perspective. The explanation concluded with the main lesson. Potential is just potential. To actually become strong, the level difference was the most important factor. The revelation that his level, not his rank, was the key to strength struck Hinata profoundly, leaving him speechless. Lying in bed, he looked at a message on his phone. It was from his younger sister, who cheerfully stated she would work hard to join him at Seishun High next year. This added more pressure on him, as he had told her not to contact him for a while, likely to shield her from his situation. Back in his dorm room, number 507, Hinata reflected on his status. He was not only F rank, but also level 0, a level even lower than the normal starting point of 1, making his situation uniquely dire. As the others at the table mentioned their own levels were 4, 5, and 6, the massive gap to Hinata's own became clear. He found it tough to be confronted with this reality, even though he was already aware of his own standing. The boy at the table encouraged Hinata, saying that with hard work and by leveling up, anyone had a chance to be rewarded. However, he then added a harsh dose of reality, admitting he had never actually heard of an F-rank person succeeding. Finally, Hinata arrived at the entrance to dungeon E117. With a steadfast gaze, he stood before the dark entrance, ready to take his first real step as an explorer, reinforcing to himself that he could not give up. Putting his plan into action, he sought out the dorm supervisor, Kiyono, who showed him the location of the nearest beginner's dungeon, E117. She advised him to do his best but not to overexert himself, reminding him that his life was the most important thing. He accepted her advice with determination. Motivated by the thought of his sister, he decided he could not fail. He reasoned that even if he was level 0, perhaps he could level up if he defeated monsters in a dungeon. With that, he resolved to try with all his might. Hinata recalled one of his main reasons for enrolling in the school: to become an explorer so he could provide a comfortable life for his mom and sister. Realizing that at his current rate he would fail them, his determination hardened, and he decided he could not give up. Hinata arrived at the dungeon's reception desk to get his license. Seeing no one there, he called out, only to be startled by a receptionist who suddenly popped up from under the counter. The receptionist gave him a cheerful welcome. Noticing his Seishun High uniform, she assumed he was a promising student and began the process of issuing his explorer license, telling him she was counting on him. The process was interrupted when the flustered receptionist realized she couldn't find a necessary box. Calling herself careless, she asked Hinata to wait a moment while she looked for it in the back. The situation caused Hinata to recall how potential is evaluated. He remembered the crystal used for this purpose, whose glow and color determine a person's rank, and thought that it had been a long time since he had undergone that test. The memory of his potential test became vivid. He remembered touching the evaluation crystal, which, instead of glowing with a color, turned a lifeless, flat black in his hands. It was explained that since rank is determined by the color of one's potential, a black result actually signified the complete absence of color, the lack of any potential whatsoever. This lack of ability, this colorless state, was given the special designation of Level 0. It was as if any potential he might have had was completely devoured by darkness. At that moment, as a young boy receiving the news, he was filled with despair, unable to understand why this terrible fate had happened to him. Hinata's flashback ended. Back in the present, the receptionist cheerfully returned with the box she was looking for, only to find the reception area empty. She called out, wondering if the customer had gotten tired of waiting and gone home. Suddenly and without warning, Hinata found himself plummeting through a chaotic, dark void. Disoriented and terrified, he questioned what was happening to him and if he was even falling. The terrifying fall continued, as he saw himself as a tiny figure descending into an endless abyss. A giant, shadowy hand seemed to reach for him from the depths, making him wonder in horror if he was falling into hell itself. After the fall ended, he found himself in a place so dark he couldn't see. Unsure if he had truly landed, he looked around and questioned where he was, spotting the distant silhouette of a castle against the dark sky. As he stood in the strange, dark land, system-like messages appeared before him. He was shocked to learn that an event called Lucifer's Fall had been analyzed and that, due to the hardships he had just endured, he had acquired the skill Dungeon Information. Recognizing the system from the messages, he wondered if Lucifer's Fall was what had happened to him, and if he was now inside a dungeon. Another message then informed him that his hardships had also granted him the skill surrounding exploration. The process of gaining skills proved to be a painful ordeal. Hinata was forced to the ground, crying out in agony as a new system message informed him that his hardships had now granted him a skill providing resistance to foreign objects. His body then collapsed completely under the strain. As he lay on the floor in distress, questioning what was happening to him, another message appeared, granting him resistance to abnormal states as a result of his continued suffering. The pain was so intense that Hinata cried out for help, but the process was not over. A new message announced that his skill for resisting abnormal states had already evolved, reaching a medium level of power. With a final, weak plea for help, the evolution of his skill reached its peak. In rapid succession, his resistance grew to high, then very high, and finally culminated in complete immunity to all abnormal states, marking a dramatic transformation born from his agony. Hinata woke up with a jolt, finding himself back in his dorm room. Confused, he sat up and questioned his surroundings, wondering if the terrifying fall and the painful experience that followed had all just been a dream. However, the scene shifts, revealing he was still on the ground in the dark, dangerous location. He felt an immense sense of relief, as he knew that fainting inside a dungeon was typically a death sentence, and he was grateful just to be alive. Under a dark, starry sky, the remnants of a creature lay in the grass, setting a grim tone for the events to come and marking the true beginning of his journey within the dungeon. Now fully conscious, Hinata confirmed to himself that he was indeed still inside the dungeon. He wondered how long he was out and tried to recall what the system voice told him about the new skills he had acquired, a concept he had previously only encountered in video games. While trying to understand his new situation, another system message appeared, granting him the skill list ability. A screen materialized before him, neatly organizing all the active and passive skills he had just acquired, leaving him surprised to gain yet another skill automatically. He found his new environment exploration skill incredibly useful, as it provided him with a mental map. Through it, he discovered the air was filled with extreme poison and paralyzing agents, and realized it was only his immunity skill that was keeping him safe. With that, he decided to cautiously search for an exit. As he moved through the dark woods, he was surprised at how clearly he could see. A new message informed him that his hardship in the darkness had granted him night vision. This newfound ability, however, was paired with a new worry, as he recalled reading that even beginner dungeons contain traps. His concerns about traps were soon validated. Deeper in the woods, he came across an ominous clearing containing a pit filled with a black, viscous liquid, surrounded by what looked like large, weathered skulls embedded in the rocks. While exploring, Hinata came across a small body of water. He felt a wave of relief because although his hunger resistance skill was active, he was still very thirsty. He cupped the water in his hands and noticed its strange color, but he dismissed it as a visual side effect of his night vision skill. Overcome by thirst, he decided to drink it anyway. The moment he drank it, he was hit with an absolutely horrible taste, recoiling in disgust from the foul liquid he had just consumed. Suddenly, a system message alerted him to danger, announcing that his vitality recovery skill had evolved to a high level. He initially thought monsters were approaching, but his exploration skill showed no threats nearby. He then realized the water itself must have been the source of the danger. After he recoiled, the pool of water reacted violently, splashing and erupting as if it were a hostile entity, throwing Hinata back with its force. Looking at the ground where he had spat, he saw the droplets bubble and fizz corrosively. He realized with horror that he had just drunk extremely poisonous water. He wiped sweat from his brow, acknowledging that his immunity skill had saved him yet again. The close call served as a harsh lesson that he needed to act with much more care moving forward. With his resolve renewed and a greater sense of caution, Hinata continued his journey through the dungeon, navigating the treacherous woods and rocky passages as he pressed onward. After walking for a considerable time through the dungeon's rocky terrain, Hinata began to feel tired. He paused for a moment, panting, as he wondered where he might find the exit. While walking, a sudden, worrying thought struck him. He realized that he didn't even have an explorer's license yet and questioned how it was possible for him to have entered the dungeon at all. His thoughts were abruptly cut short when he felt a strange and powerful presence. He stopped dead in his tracks, nervously looking around and questioning if a monster was nearby. Before he could react further, a monstrous, dragon-like creature with glowing eyes and rows of sharp teeth emerged from the darkness, looming directly behind the terrified Hinata. Staring at the massive beast before him, Hinata was frozen in sheer disbelief. He covered his face in terror, unable to process the scale of the monster, thinking it had to be some kind of sick joke. His mind raced as he tried to understand the situation. He knew weaker monsters were supposed to appear first in a dungeon. He wondered if this creature was the dungeon's floor boss, or perhaps something even worse, a rare and powerful monster known as an irregular. Deciding on a course of action, he resolved to back away slowly and hope the monster would eventually leave. However, as he began to retreat, the creature's massive eye fixed on him, causing him to stumble and fall in a panic. Seeing him fall, the monster lunged forward, its massive jaws open wide. Screaming in terror, Hinata understood the situation was dire and that he had to escape immediately if he wanted to live. With the monster bearing down on him, Hinata turned and fled for his life. As a system message began to alert him to the obvious danger, he yelled back in frustration, saying he didn't need to be told. As he desperately sprinted away, the system reacted to his perilous situation. In rapid succession, it granted him the speed boost skill, which then immediately evolved to a medium level, allowing him to run even faster. Even with his enhanced speed, the massive beast continued its relentless pursuit, charging through the rocky canyon and shaking the very ground with its steps. The chase reached a critical point when the monster suddenly lunged, cutting off his escape path. Hinata could only look back in shock as the creature closed in for the kill. As the monster lunged, Hinata's speed boost skill continued to evolve in response to the mortal danger. It grew to a high level and then a very high level, allowing him to accelerate away from the immediate attack. The skill's evolution reached its peak, granting him hyperspeed. With this incredible burst of acceleration, he managed to narrowly escape the monster's grasp, creating a significant distance between them. He continued to flee at high speed, soon finding himself entering a dense forest within the dungeon. He quickly realized that even with his enhanced speed, navigating the difficult terrain would be a challenge. His escape was short-lived. Despite the distance he had created, the massive monster managed to catch up to him inside the forest, towering over him once more with a menacing gaze. Completely out of breath and cornered again, Hinata could only stare in exhausted terror, realizing that his newfound speed had only delayed the inevitable confrontation. Cornered in the forest, Hinata stood face to face with the massive, roaring dragon-like beast, setting the stage for a desperate confrontation that marked the beginning of a new chapter. Faced with certain death, Hinata's fear began to transform into a desperate resolve. He realized that fighting the creature might grant him even more skills, giving him a small chance to win, and he steeled himself to fight back. His newfound courage was immediately put to the test as the monster opened its colossal mouth, preparing to devour him whole. The terrifying sight overwhelmed him, and his resolve crumbled as he thought that fighting was impossible after all. Just as the beast was about to strike, a powerful, unseen force erupted from the ground beneath it. The massive monster was violently launched into the air, much to the confusion of Hinata, who watched the unexpected event unfold from a safe distance. The force of the attack sent Hinata tumbling through the air, knocking him away from the monster's immediate grasp, but leaving him disoriented and vulnerable. Having exhausted all his energy from running, Hinata collapsed to his knees, panting heavily. The massive monster still loomed before him, and he felt he had no strength left to flee. In that moment of peril, with at least two monsters now present, a familiar system message appeared. His hardship in the face of danger granted him a new skill, endurance increase, giving him a renewed hope that he might be able to endure and escape after all. As he recovered, he noticed the monster was hesitant to approach. He wondered why it wasn't attacking, and then his eyes fell upon the ground nearby. He realized he was standing right beside the same lake of deadly poison he had encountered earlier. An idea began to form in his mind. Looking from the poisonous lake back towards the monster, he realized he could potentially use the environment to his advantage. He then bent down and began to scoop the deadly liquid into his hands. With his hands full of the deadly poison, Hinata faced the monster. He adopted a ready stance, and the beast seemed to watch him cautiously, sensing the threat posed by the liquid he held. Seizing the opportunity, Hinata lunged forward and hurled the handfuls of poisonous water directly at the massive creature, splashing the corrosive liquid all over its face and body. As the monster reeled, Hinata's theory was confirmed. He was now sure that the creature, despite its immense size and power, was indeed afraid of the deadly poison from the lake. The poison began to take immediate, violent effect. The monster's flesh started to sizzle and dissolve where the liquid had touched it, causing the beast immense pain as Hinata watched his plan unfold successfully. Pressing his advantage, Hinata continued to splash more of the deadly water onto the monster, which roared in agony as its body was further consumed by the corrosive poison. As the monster finally collapsed, dissolving from the poison, Hinata remained cautious. He remembered a warning from the beginner's manual to always be careful, even when it seems a monster has been defeated. After the poison finished its work, only the creature's massive skeleton remained. Looking at the bones, Hinata breathed a sigh of relief and began to wonder if they could be useful to him in clearing the rest of the dungeon. The system reacted to his clever idea of using the monster's remains. It surprised him by granting him a new active skill, Monster Dissection, revealing that skills could be acquired not just through hardship, but also through ingenuity. He took a moment to understand his new ability by looking at his skill list. It clarified the difference between his skills. Passive ones were always active, while active skills like his new one needed to be used directly and appropriately for the situation. With a new understanding of his abilities, Hinata stood before the monster skeleton and prepared to use his new active skill, Monster Dissection, for the first time. The Monster Dissection skill worked perfectly. In an instant, the massive skeleton was neatly separated into two distinct piles, one of bones and one of what appeared to be the creature's hide, leaving Hinata impressed. He looked at the neatly piled skin and bones with excitement. He realized he had successfully harvested a great amount of valuable materials from his first kill. Upon further inspection, he found a massive magic stone among the remains. He knew such stones were valuable, but this one was far larger than anything that should be found in a low-rank dungeon. leading him to believe it would sell for a very high price. Standing before the huge piles of valuable materials, Hinata was faced with a new and practical problem. He had no idea what to do with everything or how he could possibly carry it all out of the dungeon by himself. The logistical challenge made him wish for a magic backpack or a skill that would allow him to carry anything. Remembering how he had acquired skills before, he began to genuinely wonder if just wishing for such a skill would be enough to obtain it. Just as Hinata began to lose hope, the system once again reacted to his thoughts. For having the good idea of wanting a way to carry his items, he was granted the dimensional storage skill, much to his delight. He immediately tested the new skill and found it to be incredibly useful. He could make the large monster parts vanish into storage instantly and then retrieve them just by thinking about it. He discovered that the skill also provided a convenient list of all the items he had stored. The inventory showed he had collected hundreds of bones and pieces of skin, as well as the single massive magic stone. Curious about its limits, he tried to store some of the poisonous water from the lake but found that he was unable to. He briefly wondered about the skill's limitations before deciding it was better to simply keep moving forward. With his loot safely stored away and a better understanding of his new abilities, Hinata looked out into the dark forest of the dungeon, his expression one of calm resolve as he prepared to continue his journey. Standing near the massive skeleton, Hinata reflected on the battle. He acknowledged that, against all odds, he had somehow managed to defeat such a huge and powerful monster. However, his victory brought a grim realization, which he likened to a mathematical certainty. 0 multiplied by any number is still 0. He understood that his victory, while significant, might not have changed his fundamental weakness. His fears were confirmed. Despite defeating the monster and acquiring numerous skills, he checked his status and found that his level remained unchanged. He was still level 0. A new chapter begins, introducing a new area of the dungeon inhabited by small, spiky, rabbit-like creatures, setting the stage for Hinata's next encounter. Faced with yet another new type of monster, Hinata expressed his exasperation. Realizing he was outmatched, he decided his best course of action was to try and move through the area stealthily, without being noticed. He observed the strange creatures, which resembled spiky, armored rabbits. They appeared alert and quick, posing a significant challenge to his attempt to pass by undetected. His attempt at stealth failed when he unexpectedly fell into a simple pitfall trap. As he fell, however, the system once again reacted to his hardship, granting him both the trap detection and trap invalidation skills. Triggering the trap alerted the nearby monsters. A swarm of the creatures, now revealed to have wings, descended upon Hinata, forcing him to dodge and weave through their frantic aerial. While dodging the swarm, Hinata had a sudden realization. Having just escaped the massive dragon, he perceived the movements of these smaller monsters as being much slower in comparison. He wondered if his new transcendent speed skill was the cause. From his perspective, the movements and attacks of the rabbit-like creatures seemed almost frozen in time, giving him ample opportunity to react. With his enhanced perception, he was able to easily identify an opening in the attack pattern of one of the creatures. Seeing his chance, he steeled himself to launch a counterattack. He threw a punch, but quickly discovered that his speed alone was not enough to harm the creature. The monster appeared unfazed, making Hinata question if simply being faster was a sufficient advantage. Adapting his strategy, Hinata attacked again. This time he struck out at 2 of the creatures simultaneously, showing he was learning to combine his incredible speed with more effective combat maneuvers. Hinata landed a solid, powerful punch directly on one of the spiky creatures, showing that his new combat approach was effective. The force of his punch sent the monster flying. In that moment, a system message confirmed that through the experience of the fight, he had acquired the new skill, bare hand strengthening. He was thrilled by this development. It was the confirmation he had been waiting for. He could truly acquire new skills through direct combat experience, giving him a tangible path to becoming stronger. As he continued to fight, his new skill grew rapidly. After landing another successful blow, the system announced that his bare hand strengthening had already evolved into a proper martial arts skill due to his accumulated experience. The battle raged on, and the system continued to grant him new skills in response to the danger, including emergency evasion and resistances to fear and pressure. He noticed he was no longer intimidated and, while his level remained at 0, he was grateful for the rapid acquisition of so many useful abilities. In the heat of battle, Hinata had a sobering thought. He realized that if he was struggling this much against these relatively weak monsters, he would be nothing but a burden to any party in a higher-level dungeon. To avoid that fate, he made a new resolution. He would focus on acquiring as many skills as he possibly could, using them to compensate for his lack of a high level. He remembered the words of encouragement he had received, that hard work would be rewarded. He shouted with renewed purpose, vowing that he would embody those words and prove them to be true. After defeating the swarm of creatures, he took stock of his loot. He had gathered a large amount of meat, bones, skin, and magic stones. Noticing that the stones seemed larger and different from what the beginner's guide had described. With his inventory full, Hinata set a clear, short-term goal for himself. For now, he would simply focus on surviving, gathering all the materials and magic stones he could, and finding a way out of the dungeon. After his journey, Hinata finally saw a light ahead and realized it was the dungeon's exit. As he ran towards it, he reflected on everything that had happened. His first dungeon, his first monster kill, and his first step into this new world. With a look of exhilaration on his face, he thought about all of his firsts as he finally burst out of the dungeon's darkness and back into the light. The first thing he saw upon returning was the dungeon receptionist, who looked back at him with a surprised and curious expression. He found himself back in the reception area he had left abruptly. As he and the receptionist stared at each other for a moment, she suddenly let out a scream as she tripped and fell with a loud crash. Rushing to her side amidst the mess of fallen items, Hinata was taken aback when the flustered receptionist, despite being the one who fell, asked him if he was okay. After his sudden reappearance, the flustered receptionist blamed Hinata for startling her, angrily telling him he should make a noise when entering. A bewildered Hinata could only offer an apology. Once she calmed down, the receptionist recognized him and asked if he was the same student who had been there the previous day. Much to Hinata's confusion, she confirmed that a whole day had passed since his first visit. Hinata was shocked to realize he had been unconscious inside the dungeon for an entire day and was simply lucky to be alive. The receptionist, oblivious to his near-death experience, just stared at him blankly. The conversation then returned to the matter at hand. The receptionist correctly assumed he still needed a license, while another person at the counter smugly pointed out the obvious, teasingly offering to explain the license's uses. Now back on track, the energetic receptionist presented the ornate box she had been looking for earlier. She instructed Hinata to put his hand inside it to finally receive his explorer's license, and he prepared to do so. As soon as Hinata placed his hand in the box, black smoke billowed out, shocking the receptionists. He calmly explained that this reaction was him, confirming that he had been level 0 since birth. The revelation of him being level 0 left the main receptionist completely flustered, while her horned coworker apologized for her shocked reaction. Hinata calmly reassured her that it was all right. Despite the unusual reaction, the process was successful. A crest, the official mark of an explorer, appeared on the back of his hand, signifying that his license was now granted. One of the receptionists congratulated him on becoming a full-fledged explorer. Hinata was filled with hope, thinking that even if he couldn't fight powerful monsters, he could now enter low-ranked dungeons to gather materials, earn money to help his family, and buy presents for his sister. Overjoyed and genuinely grateful for their help, Hinata gave the receptionists a bright, sincere thank you, celebrating the official start of his journey as an explorer. Sometime later, a public announcement was broadcast from an airship. It revealed a shocking development in the explorer rankings. A new explorer had amazingly taken first place, but for some unknown reason, their name was displayed only as. From a window at the academy, Hinata heard the news of this historic achievement. He wistfully hoped that he too might make it into the rankings someday, but for now, he was content with just stabilizing his life. The sudden appearance of the mysterious number 1 ranked explorer sent ripples through the world, causing it to change on that day. While some, like his classmate from the cafeteria, reacted with joy, others, like Kai, reacted with anger and frustration. With a newfound confidence, Hinata looked toward the future. No one knew it at the time, not even the unknown Level 0 explorer himself, that this was the very beginning of a legend that started from zero. Having successfully cleared the beginner's dungeon, Hinata, the world's weakest F-rank, Level 0 explorer, made his way to a shopping center. His goal was to exchange the valuable items he had obtained inside the dungeon for cash. He went to an appraisal machine and first tried to sell the large magic stone from the dragon-like monster. To his dismay, the machine identified it as a magic stone of rank X, but was unable to appraise its value, leaving him confused as to why. A message on the machine screen instructed him that for items that cannot be appraised, he would need to contact a special rare item purchase consultation center, confirming that he wouldn't be able to sell the valuable stone there. Growing increasingly concerned, he then tried to appraise the other high-quality materials he had gathered, the mysterious bones and the unknown skin, only to receive the same cannot be appraised error for each one. Frustrated, he began to wonder if the machine itself was broken. He realized that after all his effort, the only items he could likely sell were the small, common magic stones he had collected from the rabbit-like monsters. When he tried to sell one of the small magic stones from the rabbit-like monsters, the appraisal machine identified it as a special magic stone and gave it an unexpectedly high value of 300,000 yen. Hinata was completely shocked by the massive price. Concerned that it would be suspicious for a high school student to suddenly have so much money, he decided to only sell one of the stones for now, completing the transaction while realizing he still had several more. After the excitement and the ordeal of the past day, Hinata finally returned to his dorm building, feeling utterly exhausted. As he entered, he was met by the dorm supervisor, Kiyono, who looked up with a surprised expression, likely not having expected his return after his disappearance. She welcomed him back, and he apologized for his absence, explaining that he had gone into the dungeon the previous day and had been unable to return. She just laughed lightly, teasing him for being such a mischievous boy so soon after enrolling in school. Hinata asked the dorm supervisor, Sano, if she believed his story about the dungeon. She replied that of course she did, but kindly advised him not to overdo it, reminding him that taking care of his life was the most important thing. She then pointed out how dirty his clothes were, noting that anyone would believe he'd been in a dungeon looking like that. Shocked at his own filthiness, Hinata realized he needed to do his laundry immediately. With a warm smile, Sano formally congratulated him, addressing him as Explorer Suzuki. The official recognition surprised Hinata at first, before he broke into a wide, happy smile. Overcome with gratitude and relief, Hinata bowed deeply before her. He affirmed that he had truly become an explorer and thanked her sincerely for her kindness and acknowledgement. Following her advice, Hinata went to the laundry room. There, he encountered another student, a girl with long red hair, who immediately noticed a large stain on his clothes and asked if he had just returned from a dungeon. He also reflected that while he first thought Sano was cold, he now found her smile beautiful. The red-haired girl cheerfully reassured Hinata about his dirty clothes, saying it's normal for beginners. She introduced herself as Fuji Hiroto, and he, in turn, introduced himself as Suzuki Hinata. Curious, Fuji asked him which dungeon he had gone to. Hinata replied that he had been in the E-rank dungeon, number 117. Fuji was impressed by his choice, noting that most explorers try to tackle D-rank dungeons first. Hinata vaguely explained that he was forced into the dungeon by circumstances but admitted that, while it was tough, he managed to make it back safely. Putting the pieces together, Fuji became shocked when she realized Hinata had gone into the dungeon all by himself. She exclaimed that doing so was dangerous, even for a low-rank dungeon, and that he should have gone with a group. Hinata agreed that he would do that next time. In a friendly gesture, Fuji then offered to join him. She said that although she wasn't very strong, she thought she could be helpful in an E-rank dungeon and told him to invite her if he wanted. Reflecting on his conversation with Fuji, Hinata thought about what a kind person she was. Her friendly offer gave him a bit of hope that perhaps someday he too could be useful. Sometime later, the school bell rang, signaling the end of another day. Hinata sat at his desk, sighing as the classes concluded. As he was preparing to leave, Kai approached him, calling him by the old insult, Level 0, and telling him to come with him for a moment. Though initially startled, Hinata put on a smile and calmly agreed to go. Kai led him to the rooftop of the school. Hinata reflected on their history, remembering how Kai had always looked at him with contempt and physically bullied him, making Kai a symbol of terror in his life. However, things were different now. He realized that thanks to the fear resistance and bullying resistance skills he had acquired in the dungeon, he no longer felt any of that old terror at all. On the rooftop, Kai began to mock Hinata, sarcastically repeating the idea that perhaps even a level 0 could be rewarded for their effort. He approached with a menacing grin, ready to start his usual bullying. With a yell, Kai lunged forward and threw a powerful punch, aiming directly for Hinata's face, intending to put him in his place as he always had. However, thanks to the skills and experience he gained fighting for his life in the dungeon, Hinata's perception of time and speed had been fundamentally altered. To his own surprise, Kai's punch seemed to be moving in slow motion. With his enhanced perception, Hinata easily dodged the attack, leaving Kai shocked and furious. Kai swung wildly again, but Hinata evaded the second punch with equal ease. Hinata effortlessly stopped Kai's next punch with one hand, much to his bully's shock. He reflected internally that this punch, which once terrified him, now felt weaker than the attacks from the monsters in the E-rank dungeon. Feeling confident for the first time, Hinata saw his chance. He prepared to unleash a counterattack on Kai, believing he could finally fight back. Just as he was about to strike, a cold, authoritative voice commanded them to stop. It was the other Hinata, Kamui, who had arrived on the rooftop. The sheer pressure of her presence was so chilling that the system granted the male Hinata a new cold resistance skill. Kamui approached them with a stern expression. Kai, furious at the interruption, yelled at her, telling her to stop and that the matter had nothing to do with her. She simply stared him down, unfazed by his anger. Completely intimidated by Kamui, Kai gave the male Hinata a final threat before storming off. Hinata was left in shock, having never seen the high-ranking Kai back down like that. He then turned to Kamui and thanked her for intervening. Hinata was left utterly confused by the whole situation, wondering if he should have apologized. Kamui looked at him, and perhaps referencing something his sister once said about a woman's heart being complicated, she simply stated that now she understood what she meant, leaving him more bewildered than before. Immediately after he thanked her, Kamui unleashed a powerful, invisible aura. The force of it pushed Hinata back, and the ground around him began to frost over from the intense cold. The temperature continued to plummet, causing the rooftop to freeze solid. As Hinata struggled against the intense cold, wondering if this was an attack, the system granted him freezing resistance due to the high exposure. Hinata realized that the incredible cold breeze was emanating from Kamui herself. He understood that without the resistance skill he had just acquired, her powerful aura might have actually killed him. After surviving the initial blast of cold, Hinata was left completely bewildered. With Kamui standing before him, her face unreadable and shadowed, he could only wonder why she had even come to the rooftop in the first place. Deciding he wanted to avoid any further exposure to her dangerously cold presence, Hinata began to back away towards the rooftop door, seeking to escape the confusing and intimidating situation. Confused as to why Kamui was suddenly attacking him, Hinata knew he couldn't just stand there. His primary goal was to find a way to escape the dangerous confrontation. He steeled his resolve, remembering all the hardships he had just survived. He decided that he wasn't going to die here, implying he would fight back if necessary to protect his own life. Adopting a defensive stance, he resolved to protect himself from her attacks, bracing against the powerful energy she was projecting. He then lunged forward, moving to close the distance between them as their confrontation escalated into a direct engagement. The confrontation came to a sudden and bizarre end. As he reached her, Kamui suddenly broke down in tears, offering a heartfelt apology that left Hinata completely stunned and confused. On her knees, Kamui continued to cry, explaining that she had been too scared and couldn't stand the situation any longer. Her sudden emotional breakdown left Hinata completely baffled. While apologizing profusely, Kamui's thoughts revealed the source of her fear. Looking at Hinata through her tears, She was convinced that he was not a normal person. Her internal monologue explained her misunderstanding. She believed that despite being called Level 0, Hinata had actually been hiding his true, immense power all along, and that no one else had noticed his deception. She recalled the moment Kai had confronted him earlier. From her perspective, she saw it as Hinata intentionally provoking a monster like Kai. She feared that Hinata was about to unleash his hidden power and kill their classmate. Her flashback concluded with the reason for her intervention on the rooftop. In her fear of what the secretly powerful Hinata might do, she had activated her S-rank latent ability, Blessing of the Ice God, which was the source of the intense cold he had felt. Kamui's thoughts further explained her S-rank ability. It constantly emits a powerful coldness capable of freezing opponents instantly. She has learned to control it, but the power can still leak out and harm others if she isn't careful. She remembered how Hinata had taken the full force of her leaking cold aura without freezing at all. In her mind, this incredible resistance meant he was unshaken by her power and saw her as a true enemy. This perception terrified her. Believing she was facing an impossibly strong opponent who was immune to her power, she panicked, not wanting to die and unsure of what to do. Back in the present, Hinata was completely lost. He couldn't understand why she had been scared and innocently asked if it was because he had stood up to Kai. Still crying, Kamui tried to explain that she feared releasing her full power if she let her guard down, which is why she stopped. She then apologized sincerely, admitting she had misunderstood him and now realized he had endured a scary experience just to help her. Seeing Kamui so distressed, Hinata let out a sigh. In an awkward but gentle attempt to comfort her, he patted her on the head while reaching into his pocket for something. He took out a handkerchief and gently wiped the tears from her face. Surprised by his kind and unexpected gesture, Kamui stopped crying and looked up at him, flustered and trying to de-escalate the situation. Hinata awkwardly took the blame for the misunderstanding and stammered an offer to help her in any way that he could. Kamui, in turn, thanked him for helping her by standing up to Kai. To repay his kindness, she made a powerful promise, declaring that if he ever had any problems, she would do anything at all to help him. Overwhelmed by her intense offer, Hinata stammered that he would do his best to help her as well. Internally, however, he couldn't help but wonder why someone as powerful and respected as her was being so kind to him. Kamui looked down, blushing as she held the handkerchief he had given her. She quietly asked if he really meant his offer to help her with anything. Too flustered to speak, Hinata simply nodded in confirmation. As the sun set, Kamui decided to take him up on his offer, asking if she could request a favor from him. Hinata was left in shock at the idea of the powerful Kamui Hinata asking him for help. As the chapter came to a close, still reeling from her request for a favor, Hinata asked with genuine concern if she was sure and if it was truly okay with her, surprised that she would ask anything of him. Recalling his sister's advice to always grant the wishes of a girl he's made cry, Hinata made up his mind. He agreed to do the favor for Kamui, whatever it might be, and helped her to her feet. After their tense encounter on the rooftop, Hinata and Kamui were shown walking together in silence through the school grounds. As they walked, Hinata reflected on Kamui's incredible S-rank ability, the protection of the Ice God. He speculated that her usual expressionless demeanor might be a way for her to suppress her emotions and keep her dangerous freezing power under control. He continued to misunderstand the situation, concluding that the powerful Kamui must have been afraid of Kai. Realizing they were both heading towards the dorms, he awkwardly mentioned where he lived before waving goodbye for the evening. As Kamui turned to leave, Hinata had a sudden realization, prompted by the memory of his sister's advice. He remembered he shouldn't let a girl go home alone and should accompany her. He called out to her as she walked away, but then hesitated, unsure of what to do. He reflected on his lack of experience, realizing he had never spoken seriously with a girl other than his own sister and didn't know the right thing to say. Sometime later, while Hinata was sitting alone in the cafeteria, he was startled by the sudden appearance of Fuji Hiroto, the friendly girl from the laundry room, who cheerfully asked if she could sit next to him. She arrived with an enormous amount of food, including a towering stack of pancakes. Hinata was shocked by the sheer volume of her meal, wondering where she could possibly fit it all, while also enjoying his own delicious food. Watching her eat, Hinata found her endearing, thinking of her as a small, cute puppy that one would want to protect. However, Fuji seemed to read his mind instantly, getting annoyed and asking if he was thinking of her as a little animal. After their light-hearted squabble, Fuji noticed Hinata still seemed troubled and asked if he had any worries. He was flustered by her directness, which she playfully interpreted as him being rude. Hinata began to open up to her about his confusing encounter with Kamui, explaining that he let her go home alone since they both live in the dorms. Fuji listened with a knowing look, commenting on how difficult girls can be to understand. Realizing he had been thinking out loud, Hinata explained his dilemma, quoting his sister's strict advice about always seeing a girl home. Fuji found his earnest imitation of his sister amusing. Fuji then offered him a simple but insightful piece of advice. She suggested that while his sister's rule makes sense, the most important thing to consider is what the other person, in this case Kamui, actually wants. This new perspective caused Hinata to have a moment of revelation. Realizing the truth in her words, Hinata panicked. He now believed he had completely misunderstood the social cues and worried that someone as incredible as Kamui probably wouldn't want a level 0 like him accompanying her anyway. Fuji continued her advice, explaining that since a woman's heart is complicated, the best approach is to simply ask if they want to be accompanied. This resonated with Hinata, who realized his own sister often gave him the same advice. The conversation ended on a light-hearted note. Fuji laughed, saying she and his sister seemed like they would get along well, to which Hinata responded with a comically protective declaration that he wouldn't hand his sister over to anyone. Sometime later, Hinata met with Kamui in a private training room, ready to fulfill the favor she had asked of him. With a determined look, she agreed when he asked if they should begin. Kamui immediately unleashed her powerful, frosty aura, which filled the entire training room with immense pressure. Hinata stood at a distance, bracing himself against the overwhelming display of her S-rank power. As he endured the intense cold, Hinata worried if his resistance skills would be enough to prevent him from freezing solid, especially since, for now, all he was doing was standing still. In the training room, Kamui began to explain her favor. She told Hinata that she wanted his help to overcome her disability, which she considered her lack of control to be. She then got flustered and ran to the other side of the room, leaving him confused. With a look of fierce determination, she clarified her goal. She didn't just want to control her S-rank ability, the protection of the ice god. She wanted to master it completely. Now at a distance, she tried to explain to the confused Hinata that in order to master her power, she needed something more from him, building up to her unusual request. With a blushing, desperate expression, Kamui made her strange request clear. She yelled that she needed him to keep staring at her, needing even more pressure to practice her control, leaving Hinata utterly speechless. Finally, Hinata understood the true nature of her request. He realized from a flashback that she had lost control of her power simply because Kai had glared at her. Her disability was losing control when being stared at by boys, and her favor was for him to act as a training partner to overcome it. Hinata agreed to help Kamui with her unusual training. He understood his role was to keep staring at her, and though he felt it was all he could do, he was determined to continue. Kamui thanked him and fixed her gaze on him. Looking at her, Hinata felt a sincere desire to help her overcome her self-described disability, solidifying his resolve to see this strange training through. However, Kamui soon noticed that his normal, gentle gaze wasn't working. She awkwardly asked him if he could try giving her a more intimidating look, prompting a flustered apology from Hinata, who realized he wasn't providing enough pressure. The two stood far apart in the vast, empty training room. The unusual training session marked another strange chapter in the life of the Level 0 explorer. Following her request, Hinata changed his expression to a sharp, intense glare. This new, intimidating look finally had an effect, causing Kamui to grit her teeth as she struggled to keep her power under control. Hinata focused his intimidating gaze, his eyes glowing with intensity. Kamui stood her ground, bracing herself and gritting her teeth as she tried to withstand the pressure of his stare and control her powers. Despite her efforts, the pressure was too much. Kamui cried out as she was overwhelmed, losing control of her aura which erupted outwards from her. After her power subsided, she was left exhausted on the floor. Hinata rushed to her side, asking if she was all right. Looking up at him, she instead asked if he had somehow gotten stronger since the previous day. Hinata denied getting any stronger. He explained that since his level wasn't increasing, he couldn't truly become more powerful, even though he had acquired many new skills during his dungeon exploration. Kamui shyly apologized for crying again. Hinata, flustered, quickly insisted that she had nothing to apologize for and that the whole situation was his fault to begin with. Still blushing from his kindness, Kamui asked Hinata why he was being so nice to her, confused by his gentle behavior. Hinata explained his reasoning. He felt he had to take responsibility since he had made her cry, adding that his own beloved younger sister would get mad at him if he didn't. His heartfelt explanation made Kamui laugh. Hinata observed that now that she wasn't burdened by her uncontrollable cold aura, she was surprisingly expressive, quick to both laugh and cry. Watching her, Hinata felt a sense of admiration. He found her determination to confront her trauma admirable, and even admitted to himself that he was a little jealous of her proactive approach to overcoming her weakness. After their training concluded, the rooftop was left as a testament to Kamui's power, with the ground still frozen over and thick icicles hanging from the railings. Looking at the now unusable frozen training room, Hinata felt a sense of responsibility. He didn't want Kamui to be judged or get in trouble because of this incident and wished there was something he could do to fix it. Kamui explained that the ice from her ability was special and wouldn't melt for a long time, making the room inaccessible to others. As she spoke, Hinata began to wonder if his own mysterious power might be capable of melting her supernatural ice. The moment he wondered about melting the ice, the system reacted to the difficulty of the situation. It granted him a new skill, ice melting, giving him a potential solution to the problem. His initial attempt wasn't strong enough, but as he struggled, the system once again evolved his ability. His ice melting skill transformed into the much more powerful absolute ice disintegration, giving him the confidence that this time it would work. He unleashed his new evolved skill. In an instant, all of the supernatural ice in the training room didn't just melt, but completely disintegrated. Both Hinata and Kamui could only stare in shock at the incredible power he had just displayed. After successfully clearing the training room, Hinata cheerfully called out to Kamui, telling her that with the problem solved, he thought they could head back without any issues. Kamui could only stare at the now spotless training room, her mind unable to process what had just happened. She was in a state of utter disbelief at the power he had just displayed. Sometime later, as Hinata and Kamui walked together after school, they drew the attention of other students. The students recognized Kamui as the famous Ice Princess and whispered amongst themselves, wondering if the two were together and expressing jealousy. As their walk came to an end, Kamui turned to say goodbye. Not wanting to repeat his previous social mistake, a flustered Hinata quickly called out to her before she could leave. Trying to put his newfound social knowledge into practice, Hinata awkwardly asked Kamui if he could walk her home. He quickly added that it was fine if she didn't want him to, leaving her surprised by his hesitant but kind offer. In response to his offer, Kamui asked if he wouldn't be bored walking with her. Hinata explained he was more concerned that her trauma might act up again and wanted to prevent any weird misunderstandings. With a sincere smile, he added that since he was the cause of her distress on the rooftop, he felt he should take responsibility until the very end. His kindness and sincerity made Kamui flustered, which in turn caused her to start losing control of her powers again. She struggled as the cold aura began to leak out from her body. Seeing her struggle, Hinata acted quickly. He assured her that his skill could help and activated his absolute ice disintegration ability to nullify the cold aura emanating from her. After he dispelled the cold, a blushing and grateful Kamui shyly thanked him. Hinata, equally flustered by the moment, stammered back that she was welcome. With the issue resolved, Hinata asked if they should go, and Kamui quietly agreed. As they walked off together under the evening sky, the emotional distance between them finally began to melt.